Welcome to Rooted to Thrive, conversations to elevate our humanity. I'm your host, Rochelle Peterson-Ansari, Professor P for short. This is your podcast sanctuary for cultivating mindsets and skills to elevate our shared humanity. We're taking a deep dive into practical strategies to evolve as anti-racist, culturally competent, and inclusive individuals and leaders. In each episode, we're bringing you real-world examples and actionable takeaways. We're going to talk about personal growth, fostering connection, and creating positive change that dismantles systemic barriers and creates environments where all of us are valued, empowered, and activate our collective power. This is Rooted to Thrive. Hi there, welcome and welcome back to everyone joining us on Rooted to Thrive, Conversations to Elevate Our Humanity podcast. I'm your host, Rochelle Peterson-Ansari, aka Professor P. Today, I am honored to have Dr. Chelsea Foster joining us. She is one I count among extraordinary leaders. She has a long and rich background in education, including her current post as the head of school at Valley Christian School in Pennsylvania. She has taught pre-K to 12 English, foreign languages, and history. She's also taught at the college level. And this exemplar has also served in human resources, has a SHRM certification. And let me tell you, Dr. Chelsea has spent much of her life as a caregiver since she was a teenager. She understands the challenges of raising a family, going to school, and working while being a caregiver. And she's written books to help others as they navigate their own journey. Her books, Take Care, a devotional for caregivers, and Chloe, the Mom Doctor, are both available in English and in Spanish. But what started as a mentoring relationship when she was a student at Westchester University and a graduate student at LaSalle University, and I was an employee at both places, this has grown into a very special friendship. So Chelsea, I am honored to have you joining me today to share just a little bit of your life that you shared with me and countless others. How are you doing today?
Well, first, I want to say thank you. Thank you for giving this opportunity, this platform for people to be able to share who they are and what they want to contribute to the world. So I'm doing wonderful today. I'm here at work.
Yes, yes. And you know, the work is what we do, right? Well, it's everywhere we are, at home, right? In other institutions. But anyway, I am so excited because of our topic today, Dare to Care, supporting emerging leaders through the power of empathy. So to get started, why don't you share with us what it means to dare to care, supporting emerging leaders, and how that elevates our humanity?
So first, Dare to Care, that came up over the pandemic. Many people were moving to the Zoom platform. And so I was being asked to, instead of coming in person to speak to schools, institutions, different groups, to do it by Zoom. And so that became one of my workshops. And it really was about encouraging people to not be afraid to care for others. And that probably sounds so simple, but there are so many people who are caregivers, who are young children, who are in high school, who are in college, married, single, caring for a neighbor, caring for a spouse, caring for a relative. And it oftentimes takes a lot of courage for that person to make that initial step. I'm willing to give up my time, my energy, my resources, my finances to be able to help another person have a better quality of life. So that daring to care, it takes a lot. I dare you to be that courageous. I dare you to be that sacrificial and to be that vulnerable.
Okay.
One of the things for myself was I got to a point in being a caregiver in different periods of my life where sometimes you just find yourself on the floor in tears. Like, okay, how can I possibly do this? Why am I equipped? How can I help this person? Right. And it seems sometimes overwhelming. And so I had to learn how to ask others for help. And so it caused about a different vulnerability in me to say, you want to, but you can't always handle everything that's thrown at you.
And when we think about that elevating our humanity, like with the assumption, right, that we don't, right, like or that we need more strategies to elevate, like centering humanity, what would you say, daring to care will do for the person who's having that courage to care?
I was speaking with a counselor many years ago, a therapist, and she was telling me a story about somebody who literally would be homeless. Now, if you saw the person, you'd have no idea, right? Because they seemed very capable, very engaged, always serving and helping, but they didn't have a place to live. They didn't have a steady job because there were certain things about them that made it challenging for them to stay in a job. And so, she said the person is able to thrive because of the community around them. We don't realize how many people in our world are making it from day to day because of the community that surrounds them. And so community is important.
Mhm.
When you think about how do we manage and navigate elevating humanity. Okay.
Mhm.
So to me, it's about quality of life. Elevating humanity is quality of life, that people have access and opportunity to the quality of life that they desire,
Okay.
regardless of socioeconomic background, regardless of race, regardless of whatever circumstances that they're born into, right? But
Mhm.
they have food,
Mhm.
with shelter, and appropriate clothing.
Mhm.
And so many people who are vulnerable, who are needing a caregiver, they may not have adequate food and shelter and clothing. So we provide for them. These are people that could be in our families, in our
Mhm.
communities.
Mhm.
This is how we elevate humanity. This has always, for me, always been a part of society. When you lived in a small community, everyone looked out for each other. But now that we are in this Western mindset where it's, looking out for the individual, bringing yourself up by your bootstraps, that took away that level of responsibility on
Mhm.
others to have to look out for one another,
Mhm. Mhm.
regardless. Then it extends it beyond ourselves. Who's your neighbor, right? Who is my neighbor? When you understand that, then you not only elevate humanity, you're helping a whole nation to thrive.
You mentioned supporting emerging leaders
Hmm.
through empathy, right? Can you talk a little more about that?
I hope I pray effectively to sometimes have to compartmentalize
Okay.
different areas of my life, right? So when I'm in a caregiver mode,
Mhm.
I'm doing that, right? But
Mhm.
when I'm and so I'm following the lead of somebody else. What do you need? How can I serve? When
Mhm.
I'm working with emergent leaders, it's a little bit different. Now you're dealing with individuals who have a very set of certain skill sets. They themselves understand a little bit of this is what I'm here to do, this is what I want to do. So, in dealing with emergent leaders, that could be anywhere from someone who is just doing a job and they want to know how to do it better, how to own that role.
Mhm.
Uh, or it could be working with a leader who wants to be more effective in their leadership or wants that outsider perspective, right? So
Mhm.
I've often found myself in those positions where I'm the subordinate and the leader's looking and saying, hey, can I sit down? I feel like you're a safe place for me to talk to and give me feedback about who I am and what I'm doing. And so there's emergent leaders with mentoring those who are developing their leadership and then also helping and coming along so of leaders, right? With becoming stronger, more confident leaders.
So, can you share a bit about your background and how you became involved in this work to help caregivers, to help support? emerging leaders through empathy.
So these are two different roles in my life. In terms of being a caregiver, that's something that I grew up with. It wasn't something that I one day said, I just want to help this person. And as noble as that sounds, that wasn't my real experience. My experience was that I had a mother who was a caregiver and a grandmother who was a caregiver. I guess fifth generation firstborn, right? So my mother was born pre-World War II. My grandmother was born 1920. My grandfather 1910. So I grew up with an older generation and helping and coming alongside my mother with my grandfather who had early onset Alzheimer's, who was also blind and was North Carolina, very strong, tall, 6'5.5", who no longer had his sight nor his memory. And now you're having to help this person navigate life.
Wow.
My aunt, very intelligent, beautiful woman who got caught up in the 60s and the drug climate. And so that took a toll in her life, and to the point where she was not able to take care of herself for much of my life growing up, I'd say from 10 on. So my mother became her caregiver. And so my grandmother, who also had dementia, and she was born 1910. Just so many different people around me. Then my father had cancer when I was in my freshman year of college, and coming alongside of him. My mother had her first stroke when she was 63. So I had just had my fourth child, literally just given birth 6 months prior to that. But caregiving has been a part of my life since I can always remember. Help make food for this person, prepare this, tie their shoes, wash their clothes. So that has been a part of my life. It's been modeled for me. It's something I've always seen, and it's what I've always known. Currently, my mother-in-law, who's 91, who, if you talk to her, she'll tell you she just turned 80. She's living with me. I mean, she's living with her daughter. My husband has been very integral over the past, I'd say easily 5+ years of going to his sister's house to take care of her. And during the pandemic, my sister-in-law, who is a respiratory therapist for a major hospital in Philadelphia, during the pandemic, she was on the front lines.
Yes.
I said, Mom is with you every day. We don't know what's going on in your respiratory care. She needs to come live with us. So she literally lived with us that first week of the pandemic for the next 8 months. Now she's with us, I'd say 3 to 4 days a week.
Oh, okay.
Yes, she'll be at my house this afternoon when I go home.
Okay. Okay.
So that's been always a part of my life. In terms of leaders, I never really saw myself as a leader. I saw everyone else as a leader, as a decision maker. I've always seen myself as a servant, as a person who's come alongside to help people. Because of that caregiving experience and being able to recognize a need, the people who often have needs are leaders. They're trying to get something done and they're not sure how to go about it. There's not enough hands to do the work. And so somebody say, oh, is somebody available? And I said, well, I'm available. And other people will kind of do the, finger in the nose, not me, But I found it was easier to come along somebody to help them than to watch them struggle for me.
To come alongside someone to help them rather than watch them struggle. Yes, it's the same skill set. Yeah, yes.
So in early on in college, I came alongside of the university leaders so that when they needed help or they're doing something or running a program or whatever, I would just help out. Right. You're a college student, you have endless hours. I know there's partying and there's this, that, and the other, but you have time to find out, what do the leaders of the university need? How can you come alongside? And it was a blessing to me because I got to kind of see behind the Wizard of Oz, behind the veil, right?
Okay.
And of what really happens in leadership. And then that continued on throughout my 4 years. That continued in grad school, where I then became your grad assistant, right? And then that continued into education, where if the principal said, I need some teachers to do this, I said, sure, what needs to be done? I can do this part, or I can help for this amount of time. in all of my jobs, even in teaching, I was then assigned leadership roles, whether I had the title or not.
What I noticed is that you talked about community, right? Like there's something to say about the collective,
Mhm.
that one, we need each other, right? And actually leaders need people as well. However, I would dare say that a leader that does not express empathy well won't get the same kind of help as a leader who will. Do you agree?
Yes.
Yes. Assuming that you're also saying that empathy is, a key ingredient. Can you describe what that looks like in, a concrete example of what that might look like in someone's day, week?
So, if I could, can I come from the perspective of how does empathy impact my leadership?
Oh, okay. Yes.
For me, empathy is putting yourself in someone else's shoes.
Hmm.
So it's like if somebody has a loved one that died, I might feel sympathetic for them because I'm with feelings for them. I'm sorry that you are hurting, right? But empathy is me taking a time and saying, how does this person feel? How might this person be processing the situation? So now empathizing and in short, putting yourself in another's shoes.
Hmm. Hmm.
It helps me as a leader, and it's not that I always do this well and I always get it right, because you never know what someone else is thinking at all times or what someone else is feeling and how they're processing, right? But it's that attempt to, if I were the one in that position, how might I take it? How might I look for support? What would it look like?
Yes.
And so that helps me on how do I navigate. So, for example, my first year in leadership, where I am the head of school here, I took time just to sit back and watch. And the second person, assistant head of school, she's been here now for 20 years. So I had to spend time with the former head of school. She and I spent days so I could just listen to her. What were the highs? What were the lows? What were the challenges? What were the things that you overcome? And I just listened to her and literally tried to now imagine myself in her shoes. I was blessed to be able to do that. Sometimes when there's a transfer of power, of leadership, there's not that, there's a void, there's a
Mhm.
gap.
Right.
So I was blessed to have that with her, and I still keep that relationship. I will text her any moment. What would you do in this situation? How would you think? What was your thought process when this was initiated or originated?
Right.
So then what I do is I talk to the people about their jobs and how they process their jobs. Now, the second year, I got into the work with everyone. So I attended all of their meetings and sat with them while they did one of their projects and asked them how they thought about it. Now, for some people on the outside, they might have looked at it and said, "Oh, are you trying to micromanage?" And I said, "No, I'm not trying to micromanage. I'm asking questions because I really want to know. How did this come about? How did we make these decisions? How did this line item get put under this budget? How did this budget item get put under this line?"
Right.
So that was very good. It was very uncomfortable, I think, for people on the receiving end. And then after a while, they were like, "Oh, wait a minute, she really means no harm. There's no penalty here. There's no repercussion. There's no like whistleblowing thought. No, no, no." Oh, oh, I messed this up. I didn't realize I was doing this way. That's all right. Now we got a chance to think about how do we want to do it.
Right. Right. Right.
So then in my third year, I delegated. I said, well, I sat back and I watched. I
Mhm.
got in there and I asked questions. So now I see what you need to do. And when something comes across my table, I said, "Oh, let's give this to that person. Let's give this to this person. This belongs in their wheelhouse. This person has a skill set for that." There's some things that I've changed in the processes. So, for example, my background in HR, I developed a series of systems of how do you go through the hiring process from application, from advertising to application to onboarding. And so, getting to that point, I had to put myself in each of those person's shoes.
Right. to make sure they receive what they needed. And I'm
Right.
giggling because I have been in situations as a new employee and all of those things were not in place. So I understand how it feels not to have it. Yes.
And in the beginning of the year, it seems to run really smoothly. But when you have those middle of the year transitions, the middle of everything else, there might be something like, oh, this dropped the ball. And so this area or whatever, but we are able to pinpoint and recognize it.
Mhm.
And the person said, oh, I said, you know what? Let's make sure. And we go back to our checklist and say, was this done? Was that? So now we know who to direct you to. And this
Yes.
person will be able to take it from here.
Yes. So empathy has a role even in thinking through processes, not just for leaders, right? But anyone that you are encountering, bringing into a community organization, whether community organization, business, etc.
Yes.
Empathy, putting yourself in someone else's shoes, right? What do they need? How would they feel if they did not have these things when they got, when they started? Makes a difference. So I get that, yes. And that's so important as we develop other leaders, right? When we are developing leaders, they need, what I heard you say is we need systems. We need to understand. We need to first be vulnerable enough, right, to understand what that we don't know when we're new in a leadership role, and then understand and then listen and watch for understanding,
Yes.
literally without penalty. It is so important for people to understand that there is no penalty. You're just trying to understand. And then moving in your leadership, moving forward to then say, okay, how can we make this better? I heard you say we, yes. It wasn't just you and
Yes.
this other person's role, but how can we make it better? There's no right or wrong. We're just enhancing it.
Now, this is actually one of the things I learned from you because you corrected me years ago. And I would run up to your office, ask a question about something that you asked me about. And then I'd write it down, give it to you. You say, right there, you were like, we got to stop this. This is not effective.
Okay.
And I stopped and said, oh, I thought I was doing a good job. And you said, no. We now have a new system and it's called email.
Oh,
So what I would like you to do is if you have a question, if you send me an email, now we have an email trail of the process. I can respond to the email. You don't have to run up the steps. I don't have to get a piece of paper. I don't have to wonder where the paper went to. And I always remembered that because
mm,
you weren't trying to chastise me, to correct me because I was being a bad employee. You were trying to figure out how to make the system streamlined to make the process more profitable for both sides.
right, to make it efficient
Make
and
it efficient.
right, and for us to save time and so that our valuable time could be used on something that I would say is more important than
Yes.
going down the steps, you know? And that also comes from a prioritizing people first.
Yes.
As I want you to have more time to be available to the students that you're there to serve, right? Or whomever you're there to serve in your organization. So it only makes sense, right? That when we work on people's efficiency, although you just dated both of us talking about email, something new.
It really
But
was at
it
that time.
was new at the time. But
It's
yes.
the DOS letters. Now, if I might, one of the things you were talking about was emerging leaders.
Yes.
And this is something that might differ
Okay.
from being a caregiver.
Mhm.
When I'm working with individuals for whom I'm caring, I'm constantly looking at what they need and to serve. Well, no, actually, there is a similarity here
Mhm.
because the word is enabling.
Mm.
And as a caregiver and as a leader, I had to learn that there's a fine line between caring and enabling, between empathizing and enabling.
Mm-hmm.
So in being a caregiver, I had to acknowledge, what is this person able to do
Right.
versus what I can do for them.
Very pivotal. Say it again. Say it again.
What is this person able to do versus what I can do for them?
Yes.
So what I realize is that, so for example, my mother-in-law, she has certain things that she likes
Mm-hmm.
to drink, and she does not move around much. So I realize if I take food and snacks and I move them outside, I'll tell you, there's a surprise outside for you. She said, for me, is there somebody left something? I said, there was something left for you. So she'll now get up out of her chair and go outside, and she'll walk.
Yes.
She'll sit out there.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'll say, well, there's something else out there in the grass, and I'll put a table out there with something for her, and she'll go over and get it. So now she has just taken the opportunity to get fresh air, to get sunshine, and to take some steps outside and get exercise that she might not have if I just brought everything to her.
Yes. Okay.
Now, in
Yeah.
terms of mentoring leaders,
Uh-huh.
I think the key word is leaders. I'm not raising a child.
Okay.
I'm not caregiving for a baby.
Uh-huh.
I'm mentoring a leader. So that is a little bit more of not being so much of a gatekeeper, but being a fence, and you back up and
Okay.
you allow them the opportunity to, and I would say not even a fence, but a safety net. My
Right.
role is more of a safety net than a fence, right?
Okay.
So that when their bottom falls out, they don't, hey, that's all right. That's all right. Let's this how we get those pieces back together again, right?
Okay.
So I have to give them the room to lead, to make decisions, to mess up and fess up.
Okay. Mess up and fess up.
There's two parts to that, because you have to be willing to own that.
Yes.
And if you're not, then I have to hold you accountable to that. And so a part of my role here was to help people be confident in their leadership as educators.
Okay.
We have some amazing staff here who know their roles, who know what they know, but they're not confident enough in.
Okay.
And so it's like, I know I've been doing this role for 5 to 20 years. However, can you tell me if I'm doing a good job?
But let me say something. Let me ask you something about that. I have my theory about where that comes from, right? So the industry is education, yes, and the need for someone who's already been leading to be affirmed that they're doing it right. Where would you say that comes from? Where does that stem from?
Well, I think there's two things.
Mm-hmm.
One, there's personality. It's just going to be someone's personality that they want that affirmation. That's their love language, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they want to know that you see what they're doing. And there's also just that personality, but then there's that whatever's in their mind, how they've been raised, right? That nurture versus nature.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you say that when people feel safe to mess up, safe to be wrong sometimes, right? Like when they understand that they're unique human beings, your way as the established official leader is not the only way. You're actually not much better without them, right? Like together, you create something new. Uh,
Yes, energy
that
about.
yes, that's being a culturally competent leader as well. That's what I would call it. That's
Yes.
culturally competent leadership. So culturally competent leaders are empathetic, right? They're thinking about the other, right? And how that person is experiencing whatever, the situation is first versus what they can do for them. But what can this person do? They're looking at what the person they're supporting can do. And then, as you said, and then helping them well, not and then it could be at the same time. They're also helping them kind of see what they're bringing to the table when there's a need for that, right? When people lack confidence. My theory, right, is that in the United States, for the majority of our schooling, we do condition people to think that there's a right and wrong. And it does take away from people being fully expressive because they then get conditioned to fear trying new things. So now you're suddenly not a risk taker.
If I can add to the cultural competence part of that, for me, is that the fear of being wrong is often because people haven't known what was right. And
Mm,
part of that can be cultural, right? So
mhm,
if I grew up in a community of expectation and it was always clear, this is how we do things, this is what's inappropriate, this is what the standard is, then, and somebody who has not grown up in a culture of expectation, then when they come, they're just bringing what they know. And they don't know that what they're doing is quote unquote wrong in this new system. It's wrong in this new context. And so one of the things we've had to do is to help people to get on the same page. So we do a lot with, or I do a lot with helping people to understand the language that we're using
okay.
and defining it as a group,
Okay.
defining our actions as a group, defining our expectations as a group. And I realize it the most with middle school. When you have great teachers, it's easier for that one teacher to make the decision. They become the authoritarian in that room. But when you have a middle school group, you have different people teaching different subjects.
Right.
One student receives the output of all of that. So
Correct.
I had to go back and say, wait a minute, we're looking and assessing some of the similar concepts and skills, but in different ways.
Right.
We're putting emphasis and priorities on what's important. And the student isn't sure exactly what they're supposed to be doing and what metrics they're supposed to be evaluating themselves, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Quality or is it the quantity? And what's quality is what's valuable to you is not the same thing that's valuable to someone else. Your
Yeah.
spelling and your writing is very valuable. Your ideas is very valuable to another person. And that was a hard conversation because people are saying, well, now you want me to change who I am. And that's where in leadership, it becomes very challenging because even as a person who seeks to be an empathetic leader, not everyone may receive your empathy at the same time.
Of course. Mm,
Example, I had somebody ask me if they could do something different on a specific day, specific place, in a specific way. And I said, can you give me a moment to think about that? And they're like, well, what's the problem? If it was somebody else, would you say yes or no? I said, no, no, it has nothing to do with you or somebody else. It has to do with the fact that I need a moment to think about that so that I can give you an answer and know that this is something we can move forward with. Now, that was a short answer. The long answer was some other people had asked about that. Um, there's other stakeholders who use the same space.
mhm.
There are budget constraints. There are different things, factors I have to consider before I gave a yes to that request. Had nothing to do with how I felt about the person or that request. That request could have been the best idea. And I'm sitting here like light bulbs going off, going, that was amazing. Yes, I want to do this.
Right. Right.
But I have to make sure that I don't shoot myself in the foot in trying to accommodate this one person and ignore the 10 other variables or factors that could be impacted by that decision.
Right. So, before we close, would there be any advice that you would give to someone looking to improve their inclusive practices,
Hmm.
their um, cultural competence, uh, to elevate their empathy, or how they empathize to do their work better, to do life better. They could be in a volunteer situation and be strengthened by that.
I would say first, be a watcher. Watch the people who you work with. Who do they seem to have a good working relationship with? Because sometimes that makes it a little bit easier to say, hey, I need to get this thing done. Could you and you work together to get that done? And they're like, oh, sure. Because there are times when you want to go against the grain and you want to mix it up and have people, work with somebody different. And there's times when you just got to get it done, and you need to know that people on the same page and they get it, got it done. Go on. Listen. When you listen, oftentimes if you tell people you're listening for certain things, people will tell you what you want to hear. So if you watch, you can tell whether or not they're telling you what you want to hear. That's really what's going on. So watching and listening. The third is being open to hearing about what people say. I tell everyone on the staff, I've told people always, I said, never in a group, because nobody wants to be called out in a group, because I may have an opportunity or a different understanding of why something was done that I may not necessarily be able to convey or share or be as transparent with the group.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. But my door is always open, and parents have come to me with hard conversations. And I said, let's sit down, let's talk about it. Let's tell me what's going on. Tell me what you're perceiving. Tell me what you're understanding. So being able to not just be reflective of yourself, but being able to take feedback and criticism. So I think that's like the third, right? The fourth would be diversify your contacts. If you look at your phone and everybody is just only the people who are part of your organization, or only the people who you live next door to, or only the people, right, who look like you and sound like you will never have an opportunity, or I won't say never, right? But you have less of an opportunity to really engage with a broader perspective. So look at your phone. Who are the people who you're engaged with? I had a situation yesterday where a neighbor who would not talk with me, anyone who looked like me, even another neighbor said, oh, that lady, she didn't talk to me. She says, I hate to say this, but she did not like Asians very much. And I looked at her and said, well, I don't think she cared for Black people either. But I'm saying she never engaged. We would help. Do you want to do this? My mail ended up at her house one day. It was a big box. And she came and knocked on my door to tell me it was there. And I said, oh, let me come get it. No, you stay at your house. I'll bring it back to you. I thought, well, you could have brought it to me in the first place to go get this box. And it was completely opened. And so unfortunately, this person passed away. And the person who was overseeing the estate came over after everything's done. And she said, listen, somebody on the block needs to know that the person passed. And she said, you're the only person outside. Can I talk to you? And at the end, I said, well, listen, if anything needs to happen, you need me to look out for the house, whatever, could I have your contact number? You can have my contact information. She said, yes. 2 hours later, this literally just happened this weekend. 2 hours later, there's smoke coming from the house. The house is on fire.
Oh my goodness.
I was able to call her.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the only one on the block who had any access to them.
Wow. Oh,
and so that was an example of daring to care.
Yes.
Even when you think somebody doesn't care about you in the same way, or see the value or significance of you.
Yes.
And so that's why it's important to be willing to be open. And when you say, who's my neighbor? She's my neighbor.
Right. Yes. And that was perfect. You did when you first started talking about in the leadership role where you could go to two people and ask them to work together on something. I thought, of course, right, that's why it's so important that the relationship is not just between the leader and right the other team members. It is about the team, the entire community.
Yes.
Being supportive of the mission. And I love your story about the neighbor because you're not gonna like everybody either, but you're there for a common goal. You can get it done. Yes, and appreciate people for their skill set, what they bring to the table. Yes. And then you can get that done amicably and with great empathy. If you're thinking about the larger issue, right? Like the mission, serving, serving children, adults, clients, whomever. You're thinking about that larger mission. You can do the work amicably. And by the way, the added benefit is that you then have a better experience. You have a more enjoyable, content, if you will, experience at work, and I would dare say in life. Because what I heard from what you said about your neighbor, right, is that like you literally had an open heart. It was about who you are, not about who she was being to you. I can hear a higher call in your words, right? Like that there's something in you that says, no, I am to treat people a certain way, regardless of how they receive it. And that mindset literally could have saved the cats in the house that were still in the house, but then also the neighboring houses.
Yes, because they received all the smoke. The smoke came to my house.
No better story to encapsulate what it looks like, right, in our lives and in our work,
Yes.
to have empathy, to have a giving spirit in
And
your
it's
leadership.
easier to do so when you change and reframe your thinking. And that for myself, it's about serving the generations to come, right? So it's about the children, even the ones yet to be born, that we are supposed to leave this world a better place for them. And
That's
so I have to think about, how do I treat my elders? How do I treat the people around me, even the ones who are ignorant, even the ones, whether ignorant by not knowing or ignorant by intention.
mm-hmm.
So it's modeling that for my children.
Yes.
The other part of that is that we do have a biblical mandate to serve the least of these. And so when you see people who are not kind, oftentimes they're hurt. That expression is hurt people hurt people. And so their hurt is not an excuse to hurt people, but it's for me a window into understanding that this person needs a measure of grace.
Yes.
So I can't stay in that place comfortably of where I take on that person's burden and their hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at this person who doesn't interact with their neighbors. We have some wonderful neighbors who has closed themselves off literally behind bushes. They've grown the bushes so much that you can't see their front door. And I feel sorry for them. I feel sorry that they have not opened themselves up to receive the love and the grace that their neighbors have been wanting to give them all these years.
So you said something key, and we're gonna have to stop soon because you keep saying some key things, right? And that is that you cannot take on that person's burden. What
Yeah.
we are doing when we debate with people back and forth instead of dialoguing, when we return hurt that has come at us, we are not helping anybody. We're not helping them. We're not even protecting ourselves. We are taking on someone else's burden. We return the hurt that we are going to inevitably experience because, they're two people from different backgrounds, grew up in different households, period, right? We could look the same racially, we could be the same gender, we could, all of the things, we could all be the same religion, and all the things that we say are the same. And we still, like those of us who have partnered for life, know a little bit about this, right? That you're going to have challenges. The
Yep.
key
In this world,
is,
there will be trouble.
yes, there's going to be,
Overcome it.
yes, but the trouble comes, we don't accept that there is going to be adversity. It's just really a part of life. I can tell you, I had the experience of shifting my mindset from that as well. Having experienced a lot of trauma, I did think like the world was out to get me for some reason until I figured out that that doesn't make any much sense. So
That the rain falls and the sun shines on the righteous and the unrighteous. Has
yeah,
nothing to do with us,
that's right.
but if we can learn something through all of our experiences,
Hmm.
then we're able to see them for good, even when it's hurtful, even when it's hard. Um, we don't want to underthink the fact that every person around us has had a hard experience. It may not be the same, but they've shed tears in their life.
Yes, they have.
They've fallen to the floor on their knees.
Yes.
They felt the pang of the stomach ache or the headache or the body ache or whatever condition. And so I always say, even though the experiences are different, the hurt that we feel is always real,
Yes.
and the feelings and emotions. And if we can remember that, then it allows us to be much more courageous,
Yes.
and
Courageous leadership
and vulnerable.
and vulnerable. Dr. Chelsea, thank you so much for just being so generous with your time and your expertise. Is there a way people can find you or contact you after this, listening to this episode?
Well, you can definitely contact me, send me a message through my website, www.drchelseafoster.com. It's CHELSEAFOSTER. So www.drchelseafoster.com. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, and it's Chelsea Foster. And I believe I've shared that with you at some point. And I think those would be the two, but definitely Dr. Chelsea, DRCHELSEAFOSTER.com. And just leave me a message, leave me a note. I'd love to connect.
Wonderful. And on that note, I want to thank everyone who stopped by. Please leave a comment and share this episode. And again, thank you for listening to Rooted to Thrive.